Good morning, everyone, and welcome to March's edition of the new World of New Biz. Sorry, we are 1 minute late because my daughter was making me a cup of tea and she was just running in with it before we got started. So that is why we are 1 minute late. But that's always good because I can see the room is filling up. There's over 100 of you with us already, and the number is rising very, very quickly. I think we have over 500 people signed up to join us, or nearly 600 actually. So welcome to everyone. It's going to be a busy morning. For those of you that haven't been before, my name is Katie Street. I am the host of this webinar, and I am also the founder of Street Agency. We are an agency for agencies that really helps agencies, that's a lot of agency words, isn't it? That helps agencies connect with the brands that really need them and ultimately helps them win more new business. This month, we are going to be really digging in within this webinar into the world of pitching. So I have some fantastic panelists with me who are going to be able to teach us a lot about the good, the bad, and the ugly, especially now we are all in the virtual world, and how we can pitch better and present our ideas better, certainly as creative people within this little box that we all find ourselves in. So without further ado, and before I do my regular hygiene bits and pieces, I'm going to introduce my fantastic panel. So first of all, I have the lovely Katie Howell, CEO of Immediate Future, social media agency that does some of the most amount of content creation and amazing opportunity to win ratio. So Katie really knows her stuff when it comes to pitching, and of course new business as well. I'm sure there's be other bits that we can talk about. Then we have the wonderful, I'm going to try and read this without remembering everyone's job title correctly, Peter Hopwood. So Peter Hopwood is a speaking coach, and not only has trained lots of TEDx speakers, but also featured on my podcast last week. But I feel that we're going to be able to get a lot more out of you today, Peter, because now we're in the virtual world, whereas on the podcast, no one can actually see what we're doing. Peter was doing some really good gestures, and actually he's going to be able to teach us some really practical tips today of how you should be presenting within this little world that we all find ourselves in. And last but not least, my friend from, I'm trying to work out, Lucius, when we first met each other. It must have been over 10 years ago, I think.
Yes, getting close to. Must be 2011. Yeah, 2011, 2012.
Yeah, at not AFC Bournemouth, Southampton Football Club, wasn't it?
Southampton, indeed.
Leading marketing there, and I think we were helping do an app or something fun. So now Lucius is today our resident brand. So he has the voice of the brand and is now head of marketing and communications at EFG Private Bank, but has a whole host of experience, not just brand side, although most recently being Barclays, Southampton Football Club, and now EFG. Previously, you have also worked in the agency world, and that's kind of how we connected, isn't it? Because a friend of mine.
That's right, yeah. I have sat on both sides of the pitching fence.
Yes, which is really good. So there's going to be lots we can talk about. As always, please do raise your hand. We don't usually get people to say hi, but I might start to mix that up. So if you want to ask a question live, maybe this month will be the first month that we trial that. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand, because the new little raise hand icon looks a lot prettier than it used to. I can already see lots of you using the chat. So yeah, please do say hello to everyone in the chat. If you want to ask a question, however, I would love it if you would put that in the Q&A box, because it just means we're less likely to miss it. If we don't get to all the questions, because sometimes it does get very busy, and we have now over 200 of you with us already, that if we don't get to answer your question, I promise you we will come back to you afterwards. So we save all the questions and we do come back to you afterwards. So don't worry, your question will be answered, if not live today, then very soon after. So there we go. All my intros done in 6 minutes. Now over to the task in hand, which is talking about online pitching. So of course, Lucius, we have you with us, and I know agencies are always super keen to hear from brands. In this new crazy world that we're living in, and hopefully for not too much longer, although I don't think online pitching is going to go away anytime soon, give me some kind of hints and tips. What is it that you really want to see from agencies, and how can they how can they grab your attention within this online environment when they're pitching their ideas?
Yeah, it is very different in this virtual world. And I think there are a couple of bits. I mean, you and I have both broken 2 golden rules already, which is one, stick to a format that works. Don't start winging it halfway through a call. And secondly, is check your IT before you start. I'm working inside a bank. My firewall's the gauge is quite narrow and not much is allowed through. So I'm having to work off my phone today. So I've broken one of my own rules. But in terms of sort of digital hygiene, it's a different sort of social environment. So we talked about football clubs, pick your best players. Rather, you may have the best player on the pitch, but the best person at Xbox might not be that person. So get probably your 2 most dynamic people in the room. I wouldn't have a cast of thousands. I have sat on a pitch before which had about 19 people, and you weren't sure who was Deborah from data and who was Rachel from research and who was Adam from advertising. It becomes very difficult to sort of follow. So I would keep a couple of people, your best players in the game, and keep it simple. And I think cut to the chase. Keep it creative, keep it top level. Do not get dragged into the detail. Otherwise, you find yourself going down a non-creative route, and it's very difficult to keep people engaged and sort of creatively stimulated in that kind of environment.
This is slightly off topic, but I think feeds into topic, because what I know, lots of agencies tend to do is they tell the story they want to tell, because you get so excited, you get caught up when you're working on a pitch. You're spending often, if not weeks, sometimes months on it if it's a larger one. So you end up telling the story that you think you want to tell. But as someone that sits brand side, and I've also been lucky enough to work client side for a long time ago now, what is it that you right now, amidst everything that's going on, what's important? I know there's been lots of talk recently about the importance of agility, but for you guys, for instance, certainly in the financial sector, which obviously is one that potentially, some sectors have suffered more than others, but potentially is not suffering too badly. You might be able to stop me differently there, or at the moment anyway. What is it that what's really important to you guys right now? Because I think it's really interesting for our audience to know that, because they should be prioritizing some of those messages in their pitches.
I think it's 2 things. You get many approaches from people saying, we'd love to do this, Roy. We're X agency, we're Y agency. And if we're going to ask you to promote our own, unique selling points, our own specialisms, our unique differences, I'm looking for you to tell me in your own sort of swallow your own pill. Why are you the agency that I should be choosing? What is unique about you? What are they say a bank is a bank is a bank. We're all into points of a percentage in terms of loans and etc. You can't operate any other way. So you need to look at your other unique differences that sell you to your clients, and therefore your agency should be doing the same to say, we are unique. We're slightly different. We do it this way. When we did our recent brand repositioning, rather than just go for traditional ad agencies, we also chose a couple of branding agencies because we thought we might get a different result. If you you play guitar, you're only going to get guitar music. If you get a different instrument in the room, you're going to get a different type of music. And I think the other thing that's really important, I think people, pitch is quite a sort of a combative word. You have pitch battles, you pitch your tent, you pitch your caravan, you defend your territory. I think pitches should be collaborative, and I think we live in a very unique world in financial services. There is an awful lot of intuitive and instinctive information that we have that an agency coming into our won't necessarily know. And I think it's incumbent upon us to also share that sort of intuitive or instinctive information with them. We can't just throw them a box of matches and say, build us a castle. They need to understand some of the subtleties in our world. And therefore, it isn't all down to the agency. It is also down to the brand to invest in that pitch in order for it to be as constructive as possible. And
that's interesting, actually, because sorry, Lucius, because this is something
only just remember 1% of our world will want a pure play Swiss private bank, and therefore mass broadcast, mass audiences, mass doesn't necessarily work in our world. So we're looking for something different. So come to us with different ideas rather than other ideas that would have worked for another brand.
What do you think of the traditional pitch process? Because you're a lovely guy. I've known you for a while, and I've been having this conversation with quite a few well, agencies I know, and please guys comment in the chat about this. I know believe that the pitch process is broken, and this kind of brand is putting this brief out and all the agencies are scrambling and everyone's jumping to attention, trying to impress the brand. It feels like a start of a really bad relationship, right? When I think of how the pitch it should be, it's the start of a relationship. So to have one person in charge and one person going, oh, I'm going to impress you, how am I going to impress you, how am I going to impress you, feels to me like not a great way to start a relationship. It's certainly not how I start my relationships. I don't know, maybe I have done it in the past, maybe they've not worked.
Speaking as an industry, I think the integrity of the pitch process is probably under strain, and I think you need to be really, really clear at the start of the process what actually you want to get out of that pitch process, and is it honest? Are you really looking? Are you just fishing for ideas, or are you looking to change your agency, or are you just looking for a competitive quote to beat up your existing agency? And I think it's about integrity, it's about honesty, and it's about, as I said right at the start, being collaborative and actually investing in those agencies. They're going to spend their time, their effort, their energy, their creative sort of thought process, and there's going to be hope at the end of it. And I think you need to be really, really honest at the start to make sure that everybody has a fair chance, and you set some very clear criteria right at the start, and you know exactly what it is you're looking for. And when you go back to agencies at the end, you just don't say no thank you. You can give them constructive feedback as to why perhaps their pitch wasn't successful. And I think you owe it to them, because they've invested their time in you. You should definitely return the favor.
Yeah, and I think most brands that I speak to, and another colleague of yours actually that I interviewed for the podcast a couple of weeks ago, Harry
Evans,
who I love. So he's just moved jobs actually, hasn't he? So Harry, I met at the same time as you, and he was so young back then at Southampton.
He's still young now.
I know. He's making me feel really old. But I think his view is exactly the same, is that it's got to be more about a relationship. And I think agencies, we need to be brave to try and, if you are given a normal, I'm saying normal, what is normal? If you're given a kind of pitch process and you don't agree with it, or you want to try and work, don't be scared to ask questions, because the amount of times that I used to break the rules when I was leading pitches for agencies, and I'd right up front go, look, we're happy to follow your RFP process. However, would you be up for it if I could I have a couple of extra calls with you because I want to ask these questions, or could we come and see you? Don't be scared to ask those questions, and because some other agencies won't be, and if you do, you're
totally agree.
And you're starting to you're starting that relationship on a better footing. So because sometimes they've just done it because it's easy and it's just what they've always done. So if you are do ask if you can break the process. Obviously there needs to be some good
but and if you've got any questions, ask, because you may have a fundamental assumption right at the start that's incorrect, and you start 1 degree off course, and then by the time you finish the pitch process you're miles off course. So it's fairly sort of common sense, but I don't think you should ever be, I think people will be, people would respect the fact that you're saying, can we do this? Because you're actually now starting to sort of show how you behave and how you operate. And actually, we're going to try and do something a bit different. Some of the more maverick agencies in the past that used to go off and do sort of, disruptive, and the disruptive brands. This is about you going off and, we as a bank think we're very different to other Swiss private banks. So we do want to be a slight disruptor in the market. So we love the fact that when we were going through the process, they said, can we do this? And they put up cheeky ads saying, we'd love to put this outside, at the offices of a competitor because, and we kind of like that entrepreneurial spirit in it, and that again starts to build that chemistry, that relationship. You start to get into conversation rather than it's your turn to talk. This is a pitch. You start having that sort of organic chat out of which there's it's a terrible word, chemistry meeting comes out of those things. But eventually when you start getting a relationship with an agency, it's much more it's a partnership rather than supplier buyer kind of dynamic.
Yeah, love that. That's such a hand. I mean, and totally, and it digs into other things that not just to be brave to ask questions, but be brave to stand out and do things differently, and think about how you can stand out and do things differently. So yeah, love it. Thank you, Lucius. So over to Katie next, with her lovely sign in the background, Street Smarts, of course. So yesterday, in fact, for those of you that haven't, some of you may have joined us. Me and Katie have been co-hosting with a few other agency, new biz CEOs, and sometimes the odd brand popping in there, Clubhouse room. And last night, because we had the webinar today talking about pitching, we started talking about it early. And one of the things that we were talking about, Katie, which I think you guys do really well in your pitches, is treating the pitch a bit more like a workshop.
Yeah. So I think there's two things that have happened. First of all, a really nice return to a proper pitch process, the kind of things that I did, 20 years ago, which is a tissue session, a chemistry session. And that's because doing it right, following process, I noticed Flurry's talking about having criteria. So we have turned down pitches because it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And we're picky, and we tell our clients or our prospects, we say, we are picking you as much as you're picking us because we're good. That's the impression, not maybe as rudely as that, but it's kind of like we want to do good work and we want to build a relationship with you. So I like to think of a pitch process as not being pitch day, but stretching out across a number of weeks, preferably if they haven't given you 2 weeks in which to turn it around, but as long as possible. And part of the reason for that is exactly what you play to, Katie, which is the need to build relationships, which you kind of have to do more because we're not face-to-face and we can't chat in a face-to-face manner. So you need to do everything, and you really need, in my view, to think about it. So yes, when we do our first meeting, our chemistry meeting, we're effectively workshopping. Then we do tissue sessions, which is we'll actually skeleton the deck. We'll actually try with maybe even 3 creatives and say, and push against them so that we say, look, how would this work? Is this distinctive? And the rationale for that is, particularly in social, we go out with, you must be bold on social, and clients come to us and prospects come to us going, be bold. It's not until you're bold that you see how far they're prepared to go. And so actually you need to, prior to the pitch stage, be able to say, is this too bold? Is this not bold enough? Have we narrowed this down too much? And it is a hard and bitter lesson that I have learned, having walked into a pitch and about 10 minutes in realizing that we had gone down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's so scary when you do. And do you know what? It's the biggest question to ask when you're in the room. Sorry to interject, Katie, but I only have learned this by making this mistake myself. On the day in the room, and it might mean that you've got to ad lib and you need to be ready to have to amend what you're going to say and throw your pitch deck away maybe, but check in. Are your priorities still the same? And you should be doing that the whole way through, especially when pitch process is a long time, because sometimes, and especially now, their priorities might have changed in terms of what was important. And I've done this where I've forgotten to recheck in is, what are the most important things right now? And the company, actually, it was a company called Seedlip that we were pitching to, which you'll all know, a lovely non-alcoholic drink. And their priorities had totally changed because they were going global, and we'd been speaking to them for about 6 months, and it wasn't a traditional pitch process. We'd done everything else right, and we came second because I forgot, or whoever, but I was head of new business at this agency at the time. I'd forgotten to check in on the day. They have your priorities changed, and you've got to be ready to make that flex.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at the pitch process as not being a single event, it is about building as much of a relationship. So we don't judge. It's not just about the meetings we have. We do a heck of a lot of research. So we use Crystal Knows. We understand this person likes to be over communicated with. This person wants short, sharp deliverables. And then we do targeting on social. So we'll also effectively keep popping up
them from every angle. I love this.
Well, if we want to win, we want to win, don't we? We want to be the agency where they go, for goodness sake, they're here as well. And it's about looking at the whole thing. I like your equation to dating. It is like dating. And yes, we've got to show our best side, and we've got to put our stilettos on and our cute dresses and clothes and blah, blah, blah. We've got to look the part, right? But it isn't all that way. And a bit of self-respect also goes a long way. And even with procurement, because I absolutely adore procurement, because if you get how procurement thinks, then you can actually ask all the right questions. And if you're not scared of procurement, you can have a very enjoyable and very facilitated conversation by building out the relationship. So often with the bigger pitches, you get the RFI alongside the RFP, but there is nothing stopping you on the RFI, which tends to be the more procurement-led stuff that wants to talk about finance and, you know, how long you've been going and what clients you've got and that kind of thing. Actually having a conversation with procurement and understanding and saying what matters to you guys when it comes to the pitch beyond this dreadful form that you've made me fill in.
Yeah, it's so true though. And actually, I've had a really interesting chat with Tina Fegent, who attends our clubhouse and sits on client side as a procurement person for lots and lots of brands and runs lots and lots of pitches. And she said actually her role, especially amidst everything that's going on, is even more important. So don't forget to date the procurement person and to get them on side and think about how they might want to hear your message slightly differently, because they are more concerned about value and not just price. Value does come into it. It's not always the cheapest. I know that procurement get a bad name for that, but yeah, there's so much chat going on, right? So I've been trying to read slightly whilst I'm going through, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to pick up on. So Claire Goombridge, you asked about, and hello Claire, by the way, lovely to see you online. You were asking about, you put loads of effort into the pitch process and you've submitted, you've done your pitch, and then right at the end people start ghosting you. Does anyone have any tips for how can Claire get their attention, or at least, I mean, I have one which I've probably spoken about on here before, which is, and my brother taught me this, he works in tech sales and is a much more hardcore salesperson than I am, so use this if you feel confident, but is using the words "have I lost you," because people hate feeling like they've lost something or they've let someone down. It really plays into our core emotions, using the word lost. So yeah, if you're brave enough, and you can kind of go, sorry, have I done something to upset you? Or I don't know, it depends how comfortable you feel doing that. It's not something I always feel comfortable doing, but whenever I have done it, I've got responses back literally straight away. So
you can also Blair, sorry to interrupt Katie, but Blair Ames also has this fab which works for us. I found it working really well. Less so if you've done a pitch and got a great relationship. If you've been through that proposal where you're endlessly pushing out proposals, and there does seem to be quite a lot of people asking for proposals who don't actually have budget because they're going off and pitching it back into the business. But he constructed an email which just starts closing the loop. I haven't heard back from you on the whatever it is program, whatever the campaign was. I'm going to assume you've gone in a different direction and your priorities have changed. Let me know if we can ever be of assistance in the future. And inevitably they'll come back. And I don't know why. There's something in that trigger that means that they go, oh no, we haven't forgotten about it, we've just been busy, or it's all got dropped, but at least you get an answer,
And that is a bit like that. That's a bit like always asking, rather than asking for help, asking for someone's advice. And if you say, could you please advise me why this, that they go, oh, well, you want my advice, you want my knowledge, and you're playing their emotional game there. But it should also be baked into the process. The agreement saying we'll do the presentation, then we'll have a feedback session afterwards. And I think that's, again, it's just a decent, the integrity of the whole process. Only if it's seen to be fair, and you come back and you can explain to people this, it's exactly what please, I don't want to be deluged now with, but we are quite, a word is generous, I suppose, with the agencies that pitch for us, because we appreciate it costs time, effort, and money to do these things, and you want to get the best out of it. So it's best to invest in that pitch process with them. Even if you pay them some creative time and things to do that. And it should absolutely be part of the process at the end, where you have every, just with job interviews, you should have every right to ask, why didn't I get the job and what's my feedback so I can learn for next time.
Definitely. I love that, Lucius. It's true. And I just wish, I think all brands do want to do what you're saying, but sometimes I think people get busy maybe and forget. So yeah, don't feel, I mean, that there's no point in chasing, before you need to chase. But if it's been a couple of weeks and they were supposed to tell you after a week, then chase, definitely, because you're going to find out whether you've won or not. But what's great about doing something like a workshop in the pitch is you've then got another so you've got right, we're going to take this away now and we're going to play it back to you. You've got something additional that you need to send them. I always say, don't do the old school thing and take a little, I don't know, remember what they're called. What are they called? Storage device. Anyway, USB. Don't load your deck and everything onto there and leave it with them, because you want an excuse to be able to email them again afterwards. So yeah, anyway, those are some top tips. Now, Peter, I'm aware we're nearly half an hour in and I haven't spoken to you yet, and you have so many wonderful insights on the practicalities of owning this virtual space. So could you talk our lovely guests on this webinar through some of the things that they can be doing, I guess, with their body language to better present themselves within this online world?
Yeah, I think the very first thing, and we've kind of touched, you've touched upon it already in the beginning, is really as an agency to ask yourself, am I committed to this virtual approach? Am I committed to virtual pitching? Now, if the answer to that is, if you haven't asked that question, you're not quite sure. Agencies that are actually committing to it, investing their time, investing all the time, the logistics, the money that they would put into maybe a normal real world pitch, if they're doing that and putting it into this project online, then they're doing well, because in fact there's a lot of things you can do better, or maybe a different and to your advantage online than actually offline. Because for me, certainly, on this square box, things are almost even more intimate than in the real world, because you can actually see my face more clearly. You're more focused perhaps on what I'm saying, how I'm saying things. And also
you get to meet people's dogs.
And also
I'm so sorry.
In the background. But that's cool. That's okay.
It's bound to happen.
So there are a load of things that actually we can control. And think about this as well. I mean, instead of when you go to a boardroom, or you're going to a brand, you're going to their environment, yeah? But in a virtual world, it's almost like your environment. You have control of what people see. So this box here, we've all got our boxes in different ways. And so everything that we're sharing in terms of naturally what we say, how we say it, what comes across, how I'm moving, where I'm looking, and also everything here, these are all signals. And in a way, you could almost use that to your advantage if you think it would help start to get the people looking at you, listening to you, to kind of to be more in their, in their good books in a way. So that whole process is something you should be thinking about as well. And again, I heard it earlier on as well, a pitch, this whole traditional pitch is kind of just like one moment to shine. Yeah. But all those other moments before and after, building up that relationship, building up that rapport, the chemistry, that's so important. As you know, it's about the relationship for me, and it's about the quality of work. And so the relationships play such a big role. So I've seen, some people actually, some companies send out small videos of team members so that you can actually get used to, or get a flavor of the team, what their strengths are, who they are before the pitch. So there's almost like an introduction. I think, Katie, you do that on LinkedIn. You have, I think, a carousel that kind of introduces your team. So again, that's great because people can see who's in the team. They get a flavor of who they are before, let's say, if you were to pitch, they can, before you actually do the actual pitch. So those are small things you can do. And the approach that you take before you go into this whole process of, being committed to it and saying, yeah, this is actually something we can use to our advantage. And I'll tell you one thing else, in fact, the skill set that you learn, the skill set that you develop online. So if you keep doing this and you get better at it, and I'm sure everybody is slowly, some more than others, by the time you go back into the real world, when it comes to actually pitching in front of somebody, that skill set that you learn here will certainly help, like condensing and making everything more concise, sharper, clearer, to the point. So important, because as you know, online, in this virtual world, things have to be clearer, sharper, quicker, because attention spans are so small. Anything on a screen, we spoke about this in the podcast, anything on a screen has to get our attention. So Netflix, films, movies, trailers, anything on YouTube, gaming, all of that is to keep our attention as long as possible. We're doing that. We have to do the same thing. If we're on a screen, somehow we have to do the same thing. So having that skill set online, developing that, investing in that will help you certainly in the real world.
I don't know about everyone else, but now Peter's like, he's just so brilliant. I'm so paranoid about how I'm sat. I'm like, oh God, I'm touching my nose, I'm touching my hair. I'm like, so I do think it's just bringing that awareness back to yourself sometimes that I forget. And sometimes I watch this back, which I really struggle to do. But it does help you if you do record your pitches, which often we are doing nowadays. Then it is worth watching yourself back.
Absolutely. So watching yourself back, number one, and we can hear it right now, and I think everybody looking would probably, I'm sure, would agree with me as well, that maybe you're too critical. Often we're too critical of ourselves. All right. Katie, you look good. You sound good. Everybody, other Katie, Lucius, everybody here looks good. It's all good. Yeah. Sometimes we're too critical of ourselves.
We've got a sexy panel. Love it, Katie.
Did you say sexy flannel? Is that what you said?
Yeah, sexy flannel. That's why it's on cue. Okay, we've teed that up earlier, guys.
Sexy flannel.
I'll remember that one. I'm not entirely sure my lovely corporate offices can quite
listen. There's nothing like a sexy flannel, and I'm sure everybody looking chat in the comment if you've got a sexy flannel, let us know. So looking back at ourselves can help us, especially in our team. And the great thing about this whole virtual pitching notion as well is that, again, when you're going to pitch at a boardroom or somebody else's environment, that environment is usually not your environment, and you don't have too much control. You only have control about what you're saying and what you're presenting. Again, online, you have that control. So the thing is, you and your team can see and feel and experience what others will see, feel, and experience even closer through this screen. So when you record yourself, you can look back at it. So you can rehearse, practice, and get everything as kind of tip top as you can before you actually present it. So there are quite a few advantages, but yeah, looking back at yourself and just being aware. It's not about critiquing everything. It's just being aware of the things you could be doing to just gain or increase your chances of more engagement and connection. Okay. So things like, so you can see now where you can actually see I'm standing up.
Oh, I didn't know you were standing up. See, that's another thing that I'm really keen on trying. In fact, I've bought a stand-up desk, which I haven't tried yet. But do you think it's good for us to stand up?
Okay, so here's the thing. If you're doing something for a longer period of time, and if you've been doing lots of Zoom calls or whatever platform you have, then sitting down for a long period of time, and we all know it does certain things to your body. So you start to crouch slightly, and third, fourth Zoom call, your voice starts to sound slightly different. Lucius, I can see you getting up there.
Peter, I'm very aware of the Desmond Morrison man watching, where my arms are shut and my body language is appalling. But actually, I'm freezing cold because I know
there you go. But the thing is, Lucius, because we've already heard you. This is my point of view, anyway. We've already heard you. We've already heard you've got great insight. We already know you're listening, and you've already shared something else as well. Even though your arms are crossed, that often is a sign that you're thinking. I guess I'm just guessing. When you think and when you're listening, do you often?
Yeah.
So there you go. So, what was the question?
I don't know, but it's good conversation regardless. But
oh yeah, standing up. Sorry,
yeah,
standing up. So standing up, does it make a difference? I think in the long term it does, because you sound better when you're standing up, slightly rather than when you're sitting down. And when it comes to a pitch, or when it comes to a situation where you have to show up and you're trying to get somebody's business, or you're trying to persuade them or convince them of an idea, or get them to agree with you, just the fact of standing up is almost like a signal to say, yeah, listen, I've got something to say. I'm serious about saying it, and I would like you to listen. Do you see what I mean? So I think you have to try it, and I think anybody listening to this should try to do it. You can get, like Katie has done, you can get yourself a laptop stand, which is fantastic, or you can do what I've done, and I've gone out and bought myself something that really, really helps, and everybody can do this. It doesn't cost really too much money at all, but it's fantastic. And that thing is an ironing board. So I've got everything here. It's set up on my ironing board. It's sturdy. It's you've got your sexy flannel. I've got my sexy ironing board. 25 quid. I don't know whether that's quite a lot of money for an elbow. You can get cheaper ones, but beware, don't get a cheap one, because the stand, it'd be too flimsy. So mine at the bottom, they've got these bars that go across. So it's really sturdy. And I've put books and boxes. I've got my lights, and I'm ready. And so just by standing up can help.
Ever. Look, I mean, I look horrible now without it. Look at that. It's amazing. And it's like a 20 quid on Amazon. It's the best thing. It's helped me so much. Fit. And actually, it makes you look like you're wearing makeup when you're not.
Yeah.
There you go. Lighting.
Yeah, so the ironing board is actually, because an ironing board is quite thin, it doesn't take too much space. And you have to check. I checked with mine. Mine goes up to 96 centimeters.
Oh wow!
Wow, that's good. Well, as far as I know, because I checked the others and they're a lot shorter. But this one goes right up.
You need a really tall one, because you're very tall, aren't you?
Yes, I'm just loving the idea of someone walking into a pitch now and back in the real world with an ironing board and laying it all out there and sort of wandering around waving their arms.
This is what I'm used to. This is what I'm used to.
Sorry, I'm old habits.
Yeah, I'm impressed with mine. It's even got a plug thing. I didn't even know ironing boards had a plug socket underneath, but mine's got a plug socket. And so if you need any advice, not on pitching but on ironing, I'm your man. Iron Man.
Oh my God, we're coming up.
Very good.
We're coming up all today. Now, there have been quite a few questions asked, so I am going to try and get to the questions. I know there's so much that I want to. I always feel like these webinars could go on for like 2 hours, and they always get like really interesting right at the end. So Jane Franklin has asked, how do we address the procurement-driven need to get 3 quotes? It's a toughie. I mean, I don't think you can escape it personally, because procurement it's the same as any of us. When I've just had some work done in my garden, I want to get 2 or 3 quotes. Unfortunately, I don't think it's something that you can avoid. All you can do is try and, put your best foot forward, and and understand the needs and understand the priorities and what's most important, not just to procurement but to the rest of the team, because everyone will have a say. It's not just going to be a procurement decision, but they're going to help make their recommendation.
Yeah, sorry, Katie.
No. So I was just going to say, you need to ask who they are, don't you? You need to ask who they are. If it's more than 3, we don't pitch, because then it's just a beauty parade. And then go and look at your contacts on LinkedIn and see who they've just connected to.
Yeah, that's great, because that will actually help you. Yeah, so you see who your competitors are, and you'll know, and hopefully you know a bit about them, and you can do a bit of stalking, and you might understand what they're going to lead with in their pitch. That's a really good tip, actually, Katie.
Sorry, Lucius.
No, but I think also, I mean, just as banks have a sort of sort of a margin that they can operate in, because, you know, if you're charging more for a mortgage, you know, you're unlikely to be competitive or whatever it happens to be. I think, you know, depending on what your sort of deliverables are in a digital space, if you are wildly out in your cost per thousands and other bits and pieces like that, that will come out. You know, why are you charging me a whole lot more? So ultimately, it's going to be about what am I prepared to pay for your ideas and the value of those ideas, and you know, how different are they to what you're doing at the moment and things like that. So I don't think procurement holds all the power. Yes, they will certainly. I think it's very difficult to sort of put a price on, you know, an idea, but they'll certainly look at some of the more sort of commoditized aspects, like, you know, well, how much you're paying for ads, how much you're paying for this, how much you're paying for that, what's your cost per thousand, those sorts of things. So they can turn around and just sort of not necessarily make the decision, but ask you to ask the agency submitting those costs why they are different.
Yeah, great answers. Hopefully that helps, guys. Rob Harris has asked a brilliant question, which I'm going to mix up how he's asked it. And it's something that we've spoken about actually previously, I think, Lucius, is what he's basically saying, you know, what is most important for brands? Is it, and this is where I'm going to add an extra thing in, is it, what Rob hasn't asked is, you know, the wow and the being impressed with the idea? Is it that you believe that they're going to be able to fulfill the brief and that they're going to be able to deliver what they're saying they're going to deliver? Or is it the people? Is there one of those things that's more important? I know we have spoken a lot previously about people buying people, but are there any of those things that you know, when you're sat watching a pitch, that you're more interested in?
I think it has to be, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the idea that lives out in the open. It has to be, you know, when we did our most recent pitch, we went to a number of different agencies and we said we want to be different. And 3 of the agencies came back thinking they're financial services, therefore their margin is this wide. And actually, we wanted to operate outside of those margins. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it was absolutely the idea. And you know, it has to be. I think if it's packaging, it's, you know, what's the design? It has to be the idea first. I think then, is that idea achievable? And at the end of the day, the people delivering on that idea are you know, they're important, but it shouldn't really. You know, do I get on better with great idea? Horrible people, horrible idea, lovely people. I'm going to go with the great idea every time.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's, you know, that's in very simplistic terms. And then obviously, is it achievable? I mean, in my previous world at Flying Pictures, we came up with some ridiculous ideas, and people did ask us, you know, is this possible? Yes, we can go ahead and do it. But ultimately, it's the actual idea to begin with that will hook people in. Yeah,
I agree. It's got to be all of the things, and you need to focus on all of them, which is why, like you said earlier, Lucius, it's good to get your best, you know, your best presenters and your best people, or the most fit for the job into the room or into the Zoom, as we are now. But I do think, you know, the idea usually, you know, is that's the big thing, right? So yeah. I don't think it should be a wow moment anymore. You need to build up to it, but yeah, you've got to have all of them. But if the idea is wrong, then you're not going to. And it absolutely should be collaborative. Do not expect your agency with minimal briefing to throw a bullseye from 100 meters blindfold with a blunt fork. It's just unfair. You've just got to work with them collaboratively in a way to organically build on the idea. And I think Katie's point of, do not send yourself down a rabbit hole. We say, this is our idea, and we go, we don't like that. What else you got? You're completely snookered. So you've got to be, it's got, you know, the pitch should be the sort of the final kind of cherry on top of all the other discussions that you've been having in the past. And I think it's very unfair for brands just to go, hello, we picked you out random, or we'd like you to submit some ideas, partly because we may want to borrow them, or as Katie said, you want to sell them internally. So I've got an idea for a campaign, and you know, you're using somebody else to come up with ideas for you. I think that's just not on, to be honest. No, yeah, you need to. I really fall back to that try and workshop stuff, and you know, the answer collaboratively. If you can make the client feel like they're on the journey with you, and they're helping make that decision, and it's actually their idea. Correct. Yeah, you've won it. I mean, that honestly is the best thing that I've ever done in the pitch world. Is really trying to, in the session, actually get them involved and make them feel like it's it's actually their idea. Very good at being persuasive, me, eh? Question from Alison Higgins. So I'm trying to do these in order of which one was asked first, but I don't think I'm doing very well. Alison asks, does anyone operate a win without pitching policy? Be interesting to see your answers here in the chat. This is something that I would love to do, but it is really hard, right, to say no when you've got pitch opportunities that you know are a good fit for you and you would potentially qualify into them. I mean, again, Blair N's book is Win Without Pitching is really great. It's a risky thing, and I've discussed it at many agencies that I've worked for and many that I work with. There aren't many that are brave enough to just absolutely say no, but I think you can be a lot pickier about qualifying in or qualifying out. And I do actually have Blair coming onto the podcast. I think I'm recording with him next week. It should be on in the next 2 or 3 weeks, which will be really insightful. And I will make sure I ask him how agencies can do this, and also, you know, agencies that he's seen do it. Anyone else got any feedback on that one?
I'd say use your Win Without Pitching strategy earlier.
Yes.
So if you work on so it becomes process, not policy. So if your process is to build long-term relationships with prospects, then actually quite often, and I've had 3 not this month, in February, because it's only the 2nd, but in February, where they've said, we're not going to put this out to pitch now, because we've had these conversations with you. So you have to start the process way back over here, rather than the point they come to you with a brief and then try and twist it. The relationship isn't there. So it's more a case of going a little bit back 4 or 5 steps and going, there is a certain percentage we will do without a pitch. But when you're faced with that big, tends to be the bigger brands, the big brand pitch, then you have to suck it up.
Yeah, agreed. It's tough world pitching, isn't it? And there's so many different ways that you can approach it, but hopefully we've given you some really good tips today. Simon Nixon has asked a really good question, saying, given the heritage of the pitch was for agencies to win ad campaigns, so yeah, days of Mad Men, it strikes him that the pitch process is often flawed for more complicated digital problems, which are hard to solve from the outside. Totally. I mean, I've spent probably the majority of my adult career at leading new business for fairly large scale, digital agencies, essentially. And you can't answer it all unless they give you everything up front. And we have, we did used to dig in really, really quite deep. We used to actually go and send our developers to go and do technical reviews and sit with the IT and development teams within the companies that we were pitching to, because it was just impossible for us to quote for stuff that and they want a fixed price within 15-20% either way. It was impossible. So yeah, I do think for certain types of agencies, the pitch process has to be a little bit different. And I do ask, I bet some of the other agencies didn't do that and made a guess at the tech, but I said that I can't quote for this unless you're able to let one of my developers come and have a look at your technical infrastructure, because until we onboard it, we just won't know, and our quote will just be thrown out of the window. So yeah, I do think there are some sectors that the pitch doesn't work quite as well for, but be willing to try and like we said earlier, break the process if you can, or at least ask, because lots of people don't ask.
Yeah, but at the same time, don't you find nowadays that rather than it just being about, the pitch is more convoluted, and what you're actually finding is that agencies come in with partners to say, this is not necessarily our specialism bit, but we partner with this agency, and this is how we get our through the line kind of process, because we're now working with them, and therefore, we're sticking to our knitting and what we're good at. And we know that this is a bit that you're going to need, and therefore, and then again, without going down, backing yourself into a corner, we'd like to talk to you. They'd like to talk to you more about how you do your search engine optimization or whatever. So therefore, you're getting a more sort of collaborative sort of set of people on the other side of the table who are all working together to deliver your pitch, because the specialisms are much more sort of, I suppose, siloed nowadays, rather than in the old days, the answer is what you need is a TV commercial.
Yeah, it's changed, definitely. Right, sorry, I'm really trying to keep on top of these questions. You keep asking them, it's great. Simon Moon. So this might be one for you, Peter, actually. Any tips on coordinating, well, for all of you, but maybe a good one for Peter. Any tips on coordinating multiple team members when pitching online? Yesterday, they pitched with 3 people, one from Greece, one in Southampton, and one in Norwich, but keeping it seamless between transitions and being able to bounce off each other. You know, it isn't the same as when you're in the room. You have a bit of distortion. There's, you know, if you're anything like me, you're probably interrupting people all the time. How can we improve the kind of natural flow between us within the virtual environment?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that's an issue, and it's something that a lot of us are facing constantly, not just in pitching, but also when we're doing workshops, perhaps with more people involved. But there's really one main answer I would give to that, and that's really the practice and the rehearsal time and the energy you put into all of this can start to solve that. So the more times that you've practiced it together in 3 different locations, and you keep doing that, and then you get to a stage where you're feeling really confident, you know you can hear when someone said something, or at the end of their sentence, that's the time, a couple of seconds, and that's the time to then click and go on to the next slide or the next transfer, whatever it is. So I think the rehearsal time, the time you invest into practicing what people see, and your team will see it, it's exactly the same as what it will look like when it goes out to the people, you know, trying to convince them. The rehearsal time and the time you put into it really, really does help. Again, the fact that you've actually got things moving is a good thing. Okay, so the engagement level, anything online, the more we have, the more transitions we have, the more kind of things that are different, that move, keep our attention going. Let's say it was just one person for 15 minutes speaking. Okay, that person would really, if it's online, would really need to have a charisma, have a presence that really manages to keep people engaged. Most of us don't have that. I certainly don't either. But other things you can do is, for example, have more people, slides, you know, graphics, even this, for example, right now. So this webinar, if it was just 2 people, I'm sure it will be still engaging, but less engaging than it is with 4 of us, because there's things that are happening all the time. There's more dynamics, there's graphically, visually, we can jump into any of us 4 here. People are listening to this and they can hear different voices. So the diversity is good. Managing that diversity is essentially, I would say, about practicing it. Because the more you practice it, you'll find out the things that don't work. You'll find out the flaws, the internet connection, for example, or that screen doesn't look good next to something else. So I would say the answer to that is really practice and rehearse to get it to a stage where it's ready to show.
Practice makes perfect. It's so true. And you're definitely doing the run through and you'll often do that and then go, oh gosh, I want to change the order, or it's so important to do it. And I know life gets busy and you kind of think, oh, we haven't got time to do it, but you must do it. And like you say, Peter, do it 2, 3, if you can do it at least twice. I think that would be the bare minimum, ideally 3 times previously. Then
I would even say get somebody else who's not involved in this process to have a look. What do you think? How did you feel? How did you feel when I said this? Was there a certain phrase, like that certain phrases and certain messages that you share at certain times, you're looking for a reaction, right? You're looking for that moment, for example. Do that to somebody who hasn't seen it before and ask them openly what they thought.
Love it. Right, we only have 5 minutes left. I don't know how that's happened. There are still about 8 questions that I haven't got to yet. So I promise we will get to them. Now, I'm going to launch our poll, which we do every month, which is giving us some really good data. So whilst I still have you all here, what I'm going to ask my lovely panelists, if you could have a look at some of the questions, if you can, maybe not for you, Lucius, I'm going to ask you to do something different. But Katie and Peter, if you can answer any of those questions by typing, please do that whilst I launch the poll, which I'm going to do now. Here we go. That will run in the background. So yeah, please do take a look at the poll. Really value your input. It helps us kind of design the webinars, the subjects that we're going to talk about, understand what we can do to help you all. And whilst you're filling in that poll, I'm going to ask Lucius in the final few minutes that we have to give us a couple of minutes on his, out of everything we've spoken about and maybe things that we haven't spoken about, top tips that agencies can do to attract your attention and deliver better online pitches.
Okay, and well, I think, you know, Katie and Peter have you know, come up with some really, really useful insights, but it's absolutely take your own medicine. Explain to us why you would be perfect to, you know, to execute this pitch. That's really important. And if I'm asking you to do extraordinary things for us, explain to us why you are extraordinary and the right people, you know, to work with us. Absolutely best, pick your best team, do all the usual digital hygiene, feedback, cameras, you know, transitions, all those sorts of things. You know, and there's an awful lot of luck in pitching. You know, right now, I think there's two things. You know, if I saw an advert for barbers, they don't necessarily need to pitch to me. I think that's opportunistic. It's probably something I need quite seriously. Ditto my wife and noise cancelling headphones being at home with me the whole time, the poor thing. So I think, you know, it's perseverance. Don't get disheartened, but also pick. You know, Katie came up with a really interesting point, which is, you know, don't say yes to every single pitch. If you feel you can answer it and do it justice, then do it. But don't pitch for the sake of pitching. And just make sure you've got a really strong idea. And if you do have any questions, ask it beforehand, because that's the operation. That's the opportunity to build a relationship. And it doesn't come in as a sterile pitch right at the end. It's about building that relationship, and it's a layer upon a layer upon a layer. And ultimately, you're not going to get backed into the corner if you've asked the right questions, and if that brand has behaved appropriately and given you the feedback and the assistance and the help that you need. And if you're not getting the help or the feedback or the information that you're requesting to help you deliver an on-message pitch, then you probably need to think why.
Yeah, love it. Lucius, there's so much I want to ask you, and I think we're going to try and get you on the podcast at some point, aren't we? So we'll be able to have a deeper chat and talk about all the other elements of new business and what attracts you and where you listen and all that kind of stuff as well. But thank you everyone for joining. Just before I sign off, Katie has given me the most fabulous reminder with her t-shirt, Katie shares your t-shirt, Girl Power, that next Monday I am hosting another webinar at a different time. So we only usually do one a month, but this month I'm doing two. At 5 p.m. I'm going to be talking to 4 of my, well, a favourite apart from Katie, obviously, because Katie and I do loads of stuff already now on Clubhouse, and Katie will hopefully be on the Clubhouse afterwards. But 4 of my absolute favourite people in our industry, I'm going to be grilling them on how women can make themselves heard, how they can help promote themselves, how men can make a more inclusive workspace, specifically within the agency world, and now we're away from the Mad Men days, and the brand world. So I'm going to forget everyone's names now. Rachel, who's head of propositions, ex-head of marketing from EasyJet. I've got my good friend Mona, who is head of digital at Organics. Fantastic lady who I made friends with through International Women's Day, who used to be head of digital at Jamie Oliver. Previous to that, she was head of digital at Channel 4 and BBC. And previous to that, she was Mary the Punk from EastEnders. I mean, she is just amazing. Linda Davidson. And of course, any of you who have attended before, I have the fantastic CEO of Takumi, Mary Keane Dawson, who is just an absolute legend and an amazing woman. So some of the ladies know each other, some don't. They're all going to connect and we're going to have a fantastic chat. So if you're free, 5 p.m. on Monday, which is International Women's Day, come, bring a glass of wine, listen. It should be a really good, fun chat. Of course, if you haven't dialed into the podcast, do dial into the podcast. I'm going to end the poll now so you can see some of the results. And we will, of course, share these results properly with you all via email and in one of the sessions very, very soon. But just to say a big thank you to all my fantastic guests for today. Thank you for all of the wonderful attendees for commenting, sending your questions. Anything we haven't come back to, we will do. And yeah, have a fantastic Tuesday. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.